Welcome to this Law for Community Worker webinar, supporting clients experiencing family violence in the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which we are broadcasting today. For me, that's the lands of the Widjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation. We pay respects to the elders of the land, both past and present, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people watching the webinar today or viewing the recording. This is part of our Law for Community Workers series. My name is Bridget Barker and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. This session will be an hour, including time for questions. After the webinar, you will receive an evaluation survey and we do value your feedback. You'll also receive an email with any resources referred to in the webinar today. I'll now introduce you to your presenter, Holly Saliba from the Legal Aid Domestic Violence Unit. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Holly Saliba and I'm coming to you today from Gumbaynggirr country in Coffs Harbour, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am a solicitor at Legal Aid and I have been a solicitor at Legal Aid for 9 years. I've worked in litigation until recently when I moved to our new domestic violence team in our region of Coffs Harbour. I have represented families experiencing domestic violence, including victims and perpetrators. I've represented children in the family courts and in the children's court. So I have quite a bit of experience in this area, so I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you today. I do have to admit that there is some slight technological issues and I'm using some different slides and Bridget's going to do the movement for me, so we might be a little bit out of sync, but that would be the reason why. So I just want to also clarify that I will be using gendered language today, and I do that out of simplicity. I do recognise that both men and women can be victims of domestic violence, but I do generally refer to women as victims, and that's because most Australians recognise domestic violence, and especially violence against women, remains a national crisis. 1 in 2 women have experienced sexual harassment. 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence. 1 in 4 women have experienced emotional abuse by a current or former partner. 1 in 6 physical violence from a current or former partner, and 1 in 6 have experienced stalking, which is increasingly being recognised by the courts, which is very helpful. However, despite this, more than 50% of Australians don't believe domestic violence happens in their community, and more than 1/3 of respondents still believe that mothers make up or exaggerate allegations of domestic violence in family law matters. Now, I know that in your work, this is something that you may have heard, but I'm also acutely aware that this is something that you are also aware of and at the coalface of as well. So like I said, I'm in the domestic violence unit. We provide a duty service for families and parents experiencing domestic violence, and we provide a wide-ranging service covering various legal practice areas, and you can refer clients to us, and some details are there to enable you to do that. So just to ensure that we're all on the same page, I wanted to clarify what we perceive and interpret domestic violence to be. Now, the family courts and the criminal courts have various definitions, and they are slightly different, but they make sense. At a social science level, domestic violence occurs when a person exercises power and control over another person. It involves coercive and abusive behaviours that are designed to intimidate, humiliate, undermine and isolate, resulting in fear and insecurity. And it covers a wide spectrum of conduct and it doesn't have to be physical or sexual. I'll talk about all the different types of violence shortly. And although every experience is unique, domestic and family violence is not a one-off incident for most people. it's generally a pattern of behaviour and control that can happen over a long period of time. The good news and interesting news is that the Family Law Act is has a review underway. So my main message at this point is, we're likely to further extend the definition I'm about to provide. Many of you may have seen this model, and it's a useful tool for understanding the non-physical tactics of power and control that may be used by a person in a situation of domestic and family violence. And today I want to use this example as a tool that I use when taking instructions and preparing evidence for clients. And often my clients, just like your clients, don't realise that they are actually experiencing domestic and family violence. You can see from this circle of power and control, there's a lot of using intimidation, and that can be making a person afraid just from looks, actions and gestures. Often a perpetrator doesn't need to say anything. They can be breaking a person's phone or cutting the phone line when they try and call for help, damaging property such as punching walls, breaking windows, kicking the doors in, damaging the car, keying it, breaking windows, disturbingly harming animals or pets or threatening to harm animals and pets, and monitoring technology such as GP trackers. Emotional abuse, is put downs and name calling, attacking the person's intelligence, and just generally wearing a person down so that they feel bad about themselves. It's humiliating them and also making them feel guilty. I've seen this happen where a perpetrator is constantly comparing my client with a better, more fictional person who would never behave this way. Often it can be a former partner and things like that, and various mind games. Isolation is another useful tool for perpetrators and something that clients don't always recognise. If they don't have a driver's licence, if they aren't visiting their family, or they're not allowed to visit their family or friends unless the perpetrator's there. Not allowing a person to work, or I had a client who had to ring up every lunchtime and speak to their partner all during their lunch break, and the partner would often ring work randomly just to double check that they really were there. They've also had to put their roster on the fridge to demonstrate that this is really where they are when they leave the house. It often involves minimising, denying and blaming. So whilst I might say, oh, this happened, I accept that this happened, it wasn't really that big a deal, or saying that the other person caused that behaviour. And a major one in my area is the way children are used to intimidate the partner, making the person feel guilty about their children, using the children to relay messages, using handover visits as an opportunity to harass the other partner, or threatening to have their children removed from them, or even threatening that if they did separate, they would have to have, and I use this inverted commas, 50-50 care automatically, which often frightens a person into remaining in the relationship because they don't trust that other person to care for the children. Privilege and authority is where they treat the other person like a servant. The perpetrator makes all the big decisions. They use their community to, I guess, also control the victim. So I have that in some of our non-English speaking communities and new migrant communities, where I can recall a client I had who had decided to leave, and it took a long time because, and she was genuinely terrified, but she was in a knitting group, and that knitting group basically kicked her out if she separated, and she just decided it was too hard. She only had a small number of friends and her English wasn't strong, so she didn't really have the capacity to, I guess, meet new people easily. And so, she was in a very difficult situation. This also involves matters of forced marriage. or coercions and threats in that nature, which we also deal with, and I have also dealt with at Legal Aid. Obviously, economic abuse. One of the major ones I see in my practice for economic abuse is where a parent is receiving a single parent payment, but in a relationship, and that the perpetrator threatens to constantly report them to Centrelink, for example, or stands at the ATM and has them remove their Centrelink money the day it's received, things like that. Or where the other partner simply controls the entire bank account. They work, they, that parent's allowed to spend X amount of money and they have to produce their receipts to show what they spent it on and explain why they spent 20 cents extra on spaghetti bolognese, which is a matter that I had, rather than travel to the other supermarket to get it. So you can see that it's complicated, and increasingly with the rise in technology, we are getting technology facilitated abuse. Video surveillance, cameras. We've had matters where your Opal card, or your card when you were traveling on trains, was being monitored. The roller door was attached to the Wi-Fi in the garage, so the person could know when every time the door opened and closed. Secret tracking devices put in on cars and handbags. Really, really concerning. The other thing that's increasingly happening is gaming with children. So the perpetrator will find out, and we've had this, for example, with the Refuge, where children will be playing games, or they'll have their location on their phone. So the dad uses that to find out where everybody is, which is very alarming. So in terms of safety planning for these clients, it's always worth trying to obtain an AVO, and we can give you advice on how to obtain like a strong case to get that AVO. If someone has sent something that's going to be deleted, tell clients to screenshot immediately, or sometimes they get another phone and video the video that they've received. The first step in separation is always to update passwords, privacy settings. The other really useful thing is ask your client just to Google themselves and see what they find. It's often very surprising what they can see. And of course, I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but a person's use and their children's use of social media. Blocking someone does not mean that the other person cannot find out, that the other party can't find out information about them. So clients will often say, they were blocked. I don't know how they got this screenshot. And we'll say they're blocked, but every relative or people that are their friends can still see it. So a really simple hot tip is always to simply not share your problems on social media. Don't criticize the other person on social media, and do not use it as a counselling session. Really, there are better, more qualified people to do that. And that simple, straightforward thing is often pays for itself later. Now, the court is really concerned about domestic violence, and it has created some new pathways for families that are ultimately ending up in the court system through the Lighthouse Project. And that's a risk screening and triage system. We have what's called the Evatt List, which is for families experiencing domestic violence, the Magellan List for recent allegations of sexual abuse. We also have an opportunity for contravention applications, and that also has its own unique list. With regards to the Evatt List, the Evatt List is an early triage. So when we file an application in the court, a registrar will have a look at the documents. They'll look through some of the things we've said in the material, and they'll make an assessment of whether this matter should move to the Evatt List. Now, the Evatt List is for serious or risk of serious abuse, family violence, drug and alcohol or substance misuse, or where the person a person is experiencing mental health issues, which makes them a risk to themselves or others. So it's not an automatic list, but the list is growing, and it's a great opportunity to provide that sort of expertise and attention that these matters require. So a question that I often get for families that are in the court, so there's a lot of early intervention that we do, but once they really are in the court, how do they get evidence? People are often confused about that, and clients are concerned that they just don't have proof. As we know, domestic violence often happens behind closed doors, and more often than not, victims protect the perpetrator and cover for them, and children do as well. So it is complicated. And so there are lots of ways that we try to demonstrate to the court that this has happened, especially when the other party denies it. What the court is focused on primarily is how to manage these risks best. So an allegation of domestic violence doesn't always mean there's just going to be no contact between a child and their father, for example. The court has some really creative ways to try and enable time to occur in a way that's safe. This can be through supervision of the child and the parent. It can put rules and restrictions about behaviours. It can limit the amount of time a child and a father spend with each other. And it can, for example, there might be an allegation where dad has a drinking problem, that he tends to start drinking at about 4 o'clock and into the night. So we might say, okay, the dad and child could have some really good visits and contact in the morning, and then the child was returned back to mum before things start to get a little bit hairy. So that's one creative way. Sometimes there's no overnights, because those are times when the other party can escalate, for example. So that can be reassuring for parents and mums too, who are afraid of coming forward because they don't want no contact, but they just want help and support to have that contact safe. And often a lot of the victims that we are helping, they've also had a long history of experiencing abuse as a child. Often they'll say to me, I never had a dad, I always wanted my children to have one. So what we do is try and help that parent come up with creative ways for their children to have a relationship with their father that's safe. And so that's what we can do. And in terms of subpoenas, so a subpoena is something that we file in a court to ask for notes and information. So we can get subpoenas on the police, the list is there, school records, hospital records. That's not limited to what we can obtain, but that's something that's a really helpful way of getting evidence together in circumstances where, for example, our client has never called the police themselves. If they've been asked, they've always denied and being protective of the perpetrator. So I've had matters where we didn't have a history of mum going to the police, but what we did when we did subpoena the father's police records is we discovered that he had a long history of road rage events. We also discovered that he had abused the neighbours, which she didn't know about. She just found it weird that the neighbours were always running away from them every time she waved, and that they ultimately moved. So there were proof of the father's aggression, and we were able to paint a picture, I think you'd say, of this father's behaviour, even though there was none that was specifically identified to being domestic violence related. And we've also had mums who've discovered that former partners have had AVOs against their partner, and they, of course, never knew about that. And often a perpetrator of violence, as they work through relationships, they get a little bit smarter and a little bit more savvy on how to manipulate and control the next partner that comes along, and so they get better at better. And so our clients, by the time they come to us, are a little bit confused and thought that, we're always told, of course, that it was the other person's fault, if anything had, as to why that relationship had broken down. The other important thing is to note is that we don't always, in fact, most of the time we don't end up in court, that there are a lot of early intervention strategies to help a client work through a plan without having to go to court, which is scary, can at times be expensive. We can do things like mediations or just draft proposals and send them to the other parent. This is also in situations where you might have a client who has recently had an AVO to protect them and the children, but they would like some contact between the children and their father, for example, and they might think they want to adjust the AVO, whereas if we speak to them from a family law perspective, we are able to find creative ways that enable us to keep the AVO, but carve out little opportunities for visits and in contact, which I think I have found is really comforting for some families too. A new addition, well, since 2019, is what we call a 102NA order, which is really a new cross-examination scheme. And that is because the fear of being cross-examined by a perpetrator. So often perpetrators are unrepresented. And so it's also very cheap for them to file and, prolong the proceedings because they are doing it all themselves. They can write wild allegations that aren't, structured in a way that the court generally approves. There's no real consistency to the allegations, and they can be really hurtful for our clients to read. So the cross-examination scheme enables parties who are victims of violence to not have to then be cross-examined by their perpetrator. And I have seen this happen. And the questions that the perpetrator asks are always inappropriate. They're not focused to the issues at hand, and they're often engaged to humiliate or traumatize the victim even further. Asking very personal questions. Why they, asking things like why they didn't follow the rules, questions of a sexual nature designed to embarrass the person. If a client that you're assisting is made aware of the scheme, or receives an order, we can certainly help them to use that. So if we can reassure people that if they are frightened of court, that there are ways to protect them within the system, even when the other person is self-represented. It's really important to know that cross-examination scheme is just a prohibition on a perpetrator cross-examining a victim. It also means that a victim who's unrepresented is able to obtain legal assistance as well. It's not a grant of legal aid, but legal aid do manage the applications for it once the court has made that order. So there's always nice to have that in the back of your mind as well. So what is FASS? Now, that's the service that I work for. Now, we are a family advocacy and support service, and it's a specialist service that provides legal and social support to clients affected by family violence. Now, what's really important is you don't actually have to be in the family court to obtain that service. So if you are working with somebody and you're just have a little inkling, a little concern about family violence, refer them to us, and we can at least assist them with planting that seed for the future. They might not be ready to deal with it. There's a lot going on, but we can certainly help get some referrals in place. Those referrals are things like psychologists and that kind of social support we are able to assist with. So if we can just move to the next slide. We're able to assist clients in getting AVOs. We can help them work out arrangements for their children, which is often the most terrifying thing for our families. If they've got a problem with you know, inquiries are being made by the Department of Communities and Justice, then we can help with legal advice around that. And in terms of the problems that we assist, how do we assist? We give them legal advice. We help them getting a divorce. We help them with child support, which is another really strong mechanism for continuing to abuse a victim after separation. And now it is a duty service, and assistance is not means tested, which means you don't have to worry about whether they're going to be eligible for legal aid grants. Everybody is welcome to come and speak to us. There are in-person services and there are telephone services. So if a client is remote or unable to drive or access public transport within, you know, working hours, then we are also able to assist. So there's no real reason that a person, you know, shouldn't be able to access us. The other really useful thing, and when I'm doing advice on the phone, is that it might be that we can only speak to a person because their partner is at work between certain hours. So they might be able to speak to us during school pickup. So they leave at, you know, 2:30, we have a fast call and we might need to have several phone calls just during that period, because that's when the client's able to leave the home, take a phone with them and have a private conversation with us. And we are happy to speak to clients with support workers present. And that is, of course, assuming the client consents to that. So if you think you would like a client to have advice, they really trust you and you've built a really strong relationship with them, and you want to guide them to us that way, then we can certainly help do that. Is there?
Hi, Holly. Yes,
Yep.
we've just had a question
Mm-hmm.
about the cross-examination scheme.
Yes.
Does the cross-examination, is it only applicable if the perpetrator is representing themselves? The victims can still be cross-examined by a lawyer. That's the question.
So
Yeah.
it applies to, so that is the framework. The framework is that the idea behind it is that a victim should not be cross-examined by a perpetrator. And so they are prohibited from doing that. And then the way that we address that prohibition is to provide the perpetrator and also the victim, if they are self-represented with a lawyer as well. So it can be both sides. So it is a really, really great service. And we can certainly place that order and then obtain legal support and representation at a final hearing for victims and perpetrators, if that's helpful.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions come in.
Sure.
Rachel,
I can't see them, so I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay. Rachel, we might leave your question to the end. It's about male victims of DV and related services. But there's a question whether partner visa holders are eligible for the FASS service.
Absolutely, yes. They're a large group that we assist.
Okay,
and we
great.
also had, I just thank you for that question, because we also have lawyers that are able to assist in regards to their visa issues as well. So whilst it's a holistic service, so there are family lawyers, but we also have criminal lawyers and what we call civil lawyers who assist in visa matters. So that's what, and those civil lawyers are also able to help with housing matters as well. So it's a really great wraparound service to assist our clients.
Thanks, Holly. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, so then in terms of who the social support service can assist, there we go. The social support service, so this is not necessarily where there's the lawyer acting for somebody, as in a legal aid lawyer, sorry. We can act whether they have a matter in court or not. So whilst I've been talking about court processes and options, it's absolutely not a requirement. We do a lot of early intervention work to try and avoid court in the first place, and court is, of course, as a last resort. The social support service also helps where a client is privately represented, whether they're privately represented through a private lawyer with a grant of legal aid or an in-house lawyer. So that would be a panel practitioner. community legal centres, and when the client is self-represented. And we also have a dedicated mental health worker that can assist male and female clients via the telephone. And in answer to the question, we are very much there as a social support for women and men, victims and perpetrators of violence, because we very much recognise that men and women can be victims, men and women can be perpetrators in the same relationship and at different times. And so it's about trying to support this whole family and improve ultimately the relationships for the children and the parents, holistically. So, and again, that also, I should add, we help grandparents who have the care of children as well. So you don't have to be a parent. I use the word parent, but I'm not, parents and carers as well. And again, this is just more information about that, of what we can do to assist. So we have the ability to sort of triage and refer to the various services to work out what supports this person needs, and advocate for them with, organisations like police and housing. And often I think I expect you'll find with your clients that they'd have lots of needs, but you don't always have the funding to access that. And so we're able to help as well, try and access various funding through, for example, victim services, to meet the needs of our clients. Okay. And now in terms of where to send them, we have in person, like I said, a client can just turn up to various court registries, and they're the Parramatta, Sydney, Newcastle, Wollongong registries. They don't have to. We have a 1-800 number there, and which are a great reference to, and then the client can decide how they'd like to obtain some assistance, whether that does need to be on the phone. Our team that take those calls are really good at working out and ask a lot of questions about a client's safety then and there. So when is the best time to call? Can we leave a voicemail? Can we send an email? Things like that. If a client doesn't want to, or is still in a relationship, and it's really important that they are only like looking at options. They're only just, I guess, testing the water, and they're not confident and they haven't yet separated, or aren't planning to. So at least we can do our best to keep them safe during that period. Another useful website is the Family Violence Law Help website, and that's an Australia-wide website as well. So that was a bit of a rush through. I would love to take questions if anybody's got them.
Yes, Holly, thanks. I left Rachel's question to the end so that there would be a little bit more time. Rachel has a question about male victims of domestic violence. She understands that statistically women are most usually the victim, but is working with a male victim who has never reported until just recently due to shame. And also he feels responsible to look after the mother of his child. He doesn't want her to get into trouble. So she's asking whether the statistics might be skewed if other male victims feel the same shame and underreport, and is also wondering whether there are any male-specific domestic violence services. And for information, Rachel is located in Wagga on Wiradjuri country.
Certainly, there is, absolutely. And I have represented male victims before and spoken to a lot as well. And there is certainly a lot of shame. And I guess often, in my experience, male victims also don't want to separate, or are concerned that if they did separate, what would happen to their children. So I understand that. Our service is available to speak to. They can still ring our number. We will speak to victims, whether they're male or female. And we do have our FASS workers. We have a male and a female FASS worker in each area being in Wagga, it is a circuit, so but we still have people that go out there and also that can assist on the phone. So call our number, absolutely. We have domestic violence courses to support those victims. We have courses to support perpetrators, and help try and guide and make real change as well. Some of the courses that I've had my clients through our FASS service access that they've contacted me and said, you know, this course was amazing, I wish I did it years ago, in particular the domestic violence service courses, which help them sort of identify and what they are experiencing, and to be able to use the language around it. And often victims do attend that course and think, oh my gosh, like the pennies drop for them, and they can't believe how many, I guess, of the different areas they were experiencing violence in, and they kind of just thought that they were being called names all the time, and they thought that that sort of probably might not have counted for much, so they weren't going to do too much about it. And that's been really helpful. And again, all victims are able to access that, and equally all perpetrators are able to access support as well, because often perpetrators are also have been victims at times themselves, whether it's as children or as adults or in their current relationship. And also they often have a lot of anxiety and depression and other things that are affecting their ability to manage their impulses. So we want to assist them as well.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions from Jane. Is the service suitable for all visa holders, including those with a bridging visa?
Yes. Yes.
Great.
So, yes. And we have a whole, like I said, immigration team.
And is the interpreter available over the phone, because most of Jane's clients don't speak English?
Yes, they are.
And another question from Rachel, do the FASS support workers go out to smaller regional towns as well? I'm supporting another client in Young who could really do with this service.
We would probably start with the phone and see what the nearest court is. I'm in northern New South Wales, so my geography is not especially strong, but we would certainly work out where the nearest court was, and people do go in person. FAS workers do go there, so we'd be able to make a plan if that was something that you thought was helpful.
Thank you, Holly. Another question, who pays for the cost of supervised time between a father and a child?
Yeah, so it can be expensive. There are different ways to pay for it. So there are different services that are at varying price points. If a client is on a Centrelink benefit, then often there is a discounted price. Part of the negotiating can be that the one party pays the entire cost, for example, or that a party who can't afford the fees will pay, say, 10% or 20% of the fee rather than the whole fee, or they can split it equally. It's something that is not automatic. It's something that can be negotiated. And sometimes supervised time by a professional supervisor occurs for a certain number of visits, and then it transitions to another supervisor who may be a family member. So grandparents are often recruited to provide supervision if they're able to, if they are confident in understanding what that role means, and they aren't necessarily wholly aligned with their child, which then they are often helpful supervisors and are also free. So we have ways of addressing the desire for supervision and the expenses around it.
Thank you. Thank you, Holly. I'll just let the audience know I've moved back because there was a request that I leave the slide with the contact numbers on screen. But I'll also let people know you will receive an email after the webinar, and I'll include those that contact information in the email. We have a question from Sophie. Is it worthwhile speaking to FASS if a client has engaged private legal representation for advice recently, or would it likely be a duplication of advice?
But they could get some social support referrals. So we might not necessarily provide the legal advice aspect. It sounds like that person's got that in hand, but we can still assist with the FASS social support side of things. So that would be where I would send them.
Thank you.
And it's certainly, if they are getting legal advice, then it's also really helpful for their case, and the lawyer assisting them, I'm sure, would also like that support for their clients.
Another question from Afiva, is property settlement for working clients mean tested?
Yes, it is. We can provide advice about and assistance with that. The legal aid income tests and the various tests that we use to determine whether a person's eligible for a grant of aid has just been increased. So if in doubt, my suggestion would be we can make that assessment on the phone, or at least a preliminary one. With property settlements, there are lots of different variables. Sometimes a person, has, they surprise us and they've got lots and lots of trusts and structures, and, obviously we're not always able to assist with them, but we want to help where we can. So send them our way and we can make the assessment.
Thank you, Holly. Ashley has asked, are there identified First Nations or Aboriginal FASS workers?
Yes, we do. If we don't have a worker in that area, we have the connections to that area to make a referral.
That's great. And it looks like they're all the questions that we have for now. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box. I'll just move to the end of the presentation now because just to let people know, if you don't already subscribe, you can subscribe to Legal Aid YouTube to be able to view any recorded webinars that we have. And we also have a Law for Community Worker podcast series that is updated regularly with new episodes. So feel free to subscribe to those, and I'll provide links in the email that people will receive after today's webinar. And of course, you can subscribe to receive Law for Community Worker alerts that let you know about upcoming webinars, about other events and podcast episodes that might be released.
Sorry, one thing that I've just thought of, that just if you've got a client who you have concerns about, they're still living in a relationship where, in a household where you think there's violence, what has been amazing with our community workers is that they'll often provide their telephone number and they will make an appointment with the client, and so we'll ring through you guys and your phone so that the client doesn't have to risk the perpetrator finding out. So that's been a really helpful and creative way that we've worked together to help meet the needs of our clients. So that's always an option too.
Yeah, that's great. Christy's saying thank you very much. The webinar's been very useful.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question. While providing the support to victims, I wonder if there are any services out there to educate the perpetrator about their rights and responsibilities.
Yes, so we still have the ability to provide legal advice to perpetrators, and also, again, that social support. So there is various courses that we can refer them to help, skill them up. They might need some parenting courses, they might need some anger management courses, and certainly we're there. Our service is able to arrange that for them as well. So it is very much victims and perpetrators male victims, male perpetrators, female victims, female perpetrators. So please don't be concerned about that.
Lots of thank yous coming through, and someone asking if they can have a copy of the slides. If you're happy to share the slides, Holly, then I can create a PDF to send to everybody.
That'd be fine.
Okay, so it looks like we haven't got any further questions coming through, just lots of thank yous for the webinar. So feel free, everybody, if something occurs to you after the webinar, you can always send an email to us at clewebinars@legalaid.nsw.gov.au, and we can forward that on to Holly and their service. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been
and thank you for all your hard work
great.
that you do out in the community. We know and we appreciate it.
Yes, community workers are invaluable, especially to the work that we do here at Legal Aid. And thank you, Holly. It's been a great presentation, and I think people have found a lot of value in it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time you join us for a webinar. I'll end the webinar now.